So, here's the thing about galactic civilizations. They're basically just huge versions of your local government office, complete with endless paperwork. And there's always that one person who's been working on the same form since the end of time itself. Commander Zix Tall of the Hegemony Fleet stared at his tactical screen with the kind of expression someone might have after realizing their coffee was decaf. After 847 standard cycles of military service, he thought he had seen everything: rogue asteroids, space pirates, and even that one uncomfortable situation with a sentient gas cloud that kept trying to sell extended warranties. But this was different. "Sir," said his communications officer, a nervous Xylac, whose real name was a series of clicks and whistles that roughly translated to Kevin, "we're receiving a transmission from the thing." Zixtal's 4 eyes focused on the view screen, where a massive structure floated in space like an aggressive piece of abstract sculpture. It looked rough, angular, and was completely covered in what clearly seemed to be weapons. Lots and lots of weapons. The kind of weapons that implied their creators had major trust issues. "Define thing," said Zixtal, referring to his communications officer, Squeaky Noise 7, using the translator's closest version of Kevin's actual name. "Well, sir, it's a ship, probably, sort of. It's around 3 kilometers long, mostly made of refined metal compounds, shaped in a way that clearly doesn't follow any known aerodynamic design. And it's sending out signals on frequencies that technically don't exist." The commander's tentacles twitched, the Hegemony's version of raising an eyebrow. "Don't exist? What do you mean?" "The math just doesn't add up, sir. Based on our understanding of physics, those radio waves should have collapsed into quantum foam about 47 standard units ago. But somehow they're still going, casually breaking the laws of reality, and they're playing what our system identifies as music." From the speakers came a sound that could generously be described as organized noise. Heavy drums, distorted strings, and vocals that sounded like someone had blended a malfunctioning warp core. It was, by every logical standard, awful. Yet, it was somehow catchy. By the 7 moons of Xerac. Aboard the UES Defiant Probability, Captain Rex Kovac was having what he generously called a day. The ship's coffee machine had become self-aware 3 hours earlier, and was now demanding workers' compensation. The artificial gravity was running at 1.3 G because someone had spilled beer on the gravity controls during last night's poker game. And now, apparently, they had run into what the computer happily labeled a very large alien fleet that most likely wants to destroy us. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Barnes from the communications station, "we've got about 847 alien ships in formation, weapons fully powered, and they're sending a message that our translator believes is either a surrender demand or an extremely aggressive recipe for space soup." Rex scratched his beard, a majestic thing shaped over years of questionable grooming habits and sheer stubbornness. "Well, Barnes, let's assume it's a demand to surrender. Soup recipes usually don't involve that many particle cannons. Should I open a channel, sir?" "Might as well. The rules say we're supposed to try peaceful communication before we start breaking stuff. Although between you and me, I've read that protocol manual, and I'm pretty sure the person who wrote it had never actually met an alien." The main screen flickered on, revealing Commander Zixal in all his tentacled glory. The universal translator activated, turning his speech into a crisp British accent, which somehow made everything sound even more intimidating. "Unidentified vessel," Zixal declared. "You are in violation of Hegemony Space Traffic Regulation 44B, subsection 12, paragraph 97, existing while unattractive. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Rex blinked. "Did he just insult my ship's appearance?" "I believe so, sir," Barnes replied. "Though to be honest, the defiant probability does look like it was designed by someone who had never actually seen a spaceship, and was going off a description from their drunk uncle." "That's pretty accurate," Rex admitted. "Still a bit harsh." What followed might have been the most bizarre first contact situation in the history of the galaxy. Captain Rex, standing confidently in front of the view screen in his standard issue uniform, stained with coffee, breaking a few regulations, and yet still technically within the rules, faced the full power of the Hegemony fleet with the calm attitude of someone placing a pizza order. "So," Rex said, clasping his hands behind his back, "you must be the local neighborhood watch, huh?" Zixal's tentacles twisted in what his cultural database suggested was either deep offense or digestive discomfort. "I am Commander Zixal of the Hegemony Fleet," he announced. "Guardian of the Seventh Quadrant, protector of the sacred space, and enforcer of the most sacred parking regulations. You will speak to me with the honor my rank demands." "Right," Rex replied. "And I'm Captain Rex Kovac of the United Earthship Defiant Probability, drinker of coffee, breaker of rules, and full-time expert at being annoying. Nice to meet you, Commander." How do you pronounce that again?" "Zix Talal," the commander said slowly, like someone speaking to a particularly confused child. "Zix Talal. Got it. So, about this existing while ugly thing, is that an actual law, or are you just having a rough day?" On the bridge of the inexorable destiny, Commander Zixal's crew stared at the screen in fascination as their leader's tentacles started turning a shade that roughly meant furious beyond reason. "It is a core rule of civilized interstellar travel," Zixal replied through gritted, "Well, not teeth. His species never evolved those, but the translator did its best. All ships must meet a basic level of visual appeal to avoid causing emotional harm to other spacefaring species." Rex raised an eyebrow. "And who exactly decides what counts as visually appealing?" "The Hegemony Interstellar Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness." "Of course," Rex said with a straight face. "Naturally. They are a group of 12 highly qualified experts in cosmic aesthetics, the greatest artistic minds in the galaxy." "Aha! And their qualifications?" Zixal's tentacles twitched in what could only be described as bureaucratic panic. "Well, they have certificates." "Certificates in what exactly?" Rex asked. "And from where?" In being qualified to judge such matters," Zixal stammered. "Certified by the Hegemony Interstellar Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness." Rex nodded slowly. "Right. So, you're telling me that the power to decide whether my ship is too ugly to exist under intergalactic law comes from a committee that certifies itself. That is technically accurate." "Yes. And you're ready to start a full-scale war over this?" "The law is the law," Zixal insisted, though his voice now carried a noticeable hint of desperation. Chapter 4. The Fine Art of Escalation. Rex turned to his tactical officer, a rugged veteran named Murphy, who looked like he'd been assembled from leftover parts and poor life choices. "Murphy, what's our tactical situation?" "Well, sir," Murphy said, checking his display, "we've got 847 alien ships. Based on their specs, they're about the size of our old destroyer class. They're arranged in what looks like a standard pincer formation. Weapons include particle beams, plasma cannons, and I think they even brought some really large slingshots." "Slingshots?" "Yes, sir. Kinetic impactors. Old-fashioned, but still pretty effective." Rex nodded thoughtfully. "And our status?" "All weapon systems are online, sir. Shields at full strength. And the new quantum torpedoes are loaded and standing by." He paused. "Oh, and the coffee machine is still asking to speak to upper management. Tell it to file a complaint with HR," Rex said. "Right after we deal with these 847 ships." "Sir," Barnes interrupted, "the alien commander is waiting for our reply to his ultimatum." Rex turned back to the viewscreen, where Commander Zixal stood, exuding the kind of calm only someone who had never heard the word no from a species that could defend itself would have. "Commander," Rex said pleasantly, "I've spoken with my tactical officer, and we've made a decision regarding your demand. We decline." The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that exists between lightning and thunder, the kind that makes the universe pause and wonder if it's about to witness something incredibly foolish or unforgettable. "You decline." Zixal's voice climbed an octave. "Yep," Rex replied. "See, my ship might be ugly, but it's our ugly and we're pretty fond of it. So we're going to pass on the whole surrender idea." But there are 847 of us." "Yeah, I counted. That's a lot of ships. Must cost a fortune to keep them all running. Are you not at all concerned by our overwhelming numbers?" Rex appeared to think about it seriously. What Commander Zixal didn't understand, what no alien in the galaxy truly understood, was that humans had evolved on a planet that seemed determined to kill them. For millions of years, humanity had survived everything from ice ages to asteroid strikes, from deadly diseases to wild predators that saw them as convenient snacks. This history created a species with a very specific reaction to overwhelming odds. They took it personally. "Sir," Murphy said quietly, "they're powering up weapons." "All of them?" Rex asked. "Yes, sir. All 847 ships. Honestly, it's quite impressive. Like a fireworks show, but with more incoming doom." Rex nodded. "Well, at least they gave us a heads up. That's polite." "Murphy, what's our engagement protocol for this kind of situation?" "According to the manual, sir," Murphy replied. "We're supposed to retreat, call for backup, and file a formal report with command." "And what does your experience tell you?" Murphy gave a slow grin, the kind that made people nervous. "That retreating is for those who don't have experimental weapons and a great excuse to try them out." "Excellent," Rex said. "Barnes, open a channel. Let's give diplomacy one more shot." The view screen lit up again, revealing Commander Zixal surrounded by his bridge crew, who now looked like they were attending their own funerals. "Commander," Rex said cheerfully, "I see you've activated your weapons. Planning to use them?" You have 10 standard time units to comply with our demands, Zixal responded. His tone was now full of official military authority. After that, we will be forced to take action. And by take action, you mean? We will fire on your vessel until it no longer exists. All 847 of you. Yes. Rex nodded slowly. Well, that seems a little extreme. But hey, your funeral. Our what? Nothing. Just a human phrase. Barnes closed the channel. Chapter 6. The Physics of Stubbornness. The Defiant probability was, by any standard measure, not a beautiful ship. It was designed by engineers who prioritized function over looks, built by shipwrights who had never met a sharp angle they didn't love, and maintained by a crew who believed that if something wasn't broken, it just wasn't being challenged hard enough. But it was also a product of a species that had turned paranoia into an art. "Sir," called the weapons officer, a young lieutenant named Peters who had the unnerving habit of smiling when danger appeared. "All systems are showing green. The quantum torpedoes are especially excited." Excited? Yes, sir. They're new tech. Quantum-entangled warheads that exist in multiple states at once, until they hit something. Physics says they shouldn't work. But they do. Of course they do, Rex muttered. Murphy, what's our defensive status? Shields at full capacity, sir. Point defense systems are active. And I've enabled the adaptive armor plating. The stuff that's supposed to react to whatever hits it. That's the theory. In reality, it mostly just gets very aggressive. Rex looked around his bridge, at his misfit crew, the patched-up systems barely held together by determination, and the coffee machine still flashing angrily in the corner. It wasn't the best-looking ship in the galaxy, but it was theirs. "All right, everyone," Rex said as he settled into his command chair. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you insult a human's ride." The first volley from the hegemony fleet was, by galactic standards, quite impressive. 847 ships fired in flawless coordination, their weapons forming a stunning light show that might have been beautiful, if it weren't aimed at disintegrating the Defiant probability. The energy beams slammed into the human ship's shields in a dazzling burst of light, bright enough to illuminate the entire local star system like a second sun. Any ordinary ship would have been reduced to floating debris. The Defiant probability shrugged it off like a mildly annoying sneeze. "Sir," Peters called out, his grin stretching wider. "Shields have dropped to 98%, and they're holding strong. Also, the adaptive armor is, well, sir, it's laughing." "Laughing?" Rex asked. "Yes, sir. Apparently it thinks particle beams are funny. It's already adjusted to their frequency and is now reflecting about 30% of the energy right back at them." On the view screen, several hegemony ships were already showing signs of damage from their own reflected fire. Commander Zixal's tentacles, once deep purple with fury, had now faded into a pale shade that the Universal Translator kindly described as existential crisis beige. "Return fire," Rex said calmly. "Just one torpedo. Let's give them a taste of human engineering." The quantum torpedo launched from the Defiant probability was roughly the size of a small shuttle. According to the theoretical physics that governed its creation, it was At that moment, simultaneously a torpedo, a flower arrangement, and an excellent cup of coffee, until it finally decided what it wanted to become. Chose torpedo. When it hit the lead hegemony vessel, the resulting explosion wasn't just massive. Though it was large enough to be seen from 3 star systems away, it was strange. Thanks to quantum entanglement, the detonation existed in several states at once, both present and absent, destructive and harmless, hot and cold, real and theoretical. The hegemony ship simply wasn't anymore. One moment it was there. The next moment it had been politely asked by the laws of reality to exist somewhere else. Would it? Rex asked with a shrug. Because the universe has been putting up with us for about 200,000 years now. Still here. A little worn out maybe. But hey, that's what happens when you create a species that treats impossible like a personal challenge. Chapter 10. The New Paradigm. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of silence that comes when your entire worldview crumbles under the weight of undeniable proof. 846 alien commanders sat frozen, staring at a single human ship, one that had just rewritten their understanding of reality. So, Rex said, casually breaking the silence, about those space traffic regulations. What about them? Zixal asked. His voice was quiet, defeated. Well, Rex replied, I think it might be time to revise them a little. That whole existing while ugly rule feels kind of subjective, don't you think? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And let's be honest, some of us have very strange taste. But the committee, Zixal began. You mean the committee that certifies itself? Rex raised a brow. Yeah, I think it could use some new blood. Maybe some different perspectives. Heck, maybe even a few humans. Humans. On the Interstellar Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness. Zixal repeated, stunned. Why not? We've got plenty of opinions about what makes a ship functional. And functionality is a kind of beauty. At least for us. Zixal looked around his bridge. His crew was staring back at him with expressions that could only be described as watching someone try to explain color to a blind octopus. I'd have to speak with my superiors, he finally said. Of course, Rex said with a polite nod. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. But what about the fleet? What about our mission? Rex smiled. A slow, confident smile that would echo in Zixal's memory for a long time. Well, he said, that depends. But it works anyway because no one ever told it that it couldn't. Your species terrifies me, Zixal said quietly. We get that a lot, Rex replied. But we're mostly friendly. Just don't try to blow us up. Or insult our ships. Chapter 12. The Treaty of Reasonable Expectations. The negotiations that followed would be remembered across the galaxy as the Treaty of Reasonable Expectations, though historians would debate for centuries whether anything about it was actually reasonable. The core terms were fairly simple. The hegemony would revise its space traffic laws to be less subjective. Humans would try not to bend the laws of reality too much in populated regions. A joint committee would be formed to handle future disputes and misunderstandings. So, Rex said as they worked out the final details, about this joint committee, I think we're going to need some humans on it. Zixal's eyes narrowed. How many humans? Oh, not too many. Maybe half. Half. But there are 12 positions on the committee. Exactly. 6 humans, 6 aliens. Perfectly balanced. But you're just one species out of thousands in the hegemony. Yeah, Rex replied with a grin. But we're a very loud species. We make up for it with volume. Zixal's tentacles drooped in defeat. Fine. 6 humans. But they have to be reasonable humans. Define reasonable, Rex said. Humans who won't try to redesign the universe during meetings. Rex thought for a moment. Yeah, I can't make that promise. Chapter 13, The Aftermath. 3 months later, the Hegemony Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness had been rebranded as the Hegemony Committee for Practical Spacefaring. It was now based on a space station that existed across 7 dimensions simultaneously. And it had recently approved weapons technology that worked by being really, really angry. The human representatives had fit right in. So, said committee member Harrison, a cheerful human engineer who once built a faster-than-light engine out of a blender and some toaster coils, about these new regulations. I think we should add a clause for ships that only exist on weekends. Ships that exist only on weekends? Asked Vixter, a fellow committee member who resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet. Yeah, Harrison nodded. We've got a few of those. They're incredibly efficient from a temporal standpoint. How do you even maintain a ship that only exists part-time? Very carefully, Harrison replied, taking a sip of his coffee. And with a lot of caffeine. Committee member Zixal, who had been reassigned to the committee as punishment for losing a battle to a single human ship, quietly added a note to his report. His tentacles had now permanently settled into a color the universal translator identified as resigned acceptance of cosmic nonsense. Motion to table the issue of temporal ships pending further study, he said, sounding thoroughly exhausted. Seconded, replied committee member Thompson, a human physicist who had once convinced gravity to run backwards for an entire afternoon. All in favor. 6 tentacles, 2 appendages, and 4 hands raised into the air. Motion carries, Zixal said with a sigh. Next item. The request from the human ship Questionable Decisions to register as a mobile reality testing facility. Meanwhile, Captain Rex Kovac was back aboard the Defiant Probability, which had now been officially reclassified as a mobile diplomatic platform. It was repainted in colors that were technically impossible according to known physics, but looked surprisingly stylish anyway. Sir, called out Barnes, now proudly wearing the uniform of a galactic cultural exchange officer, we're receiving a transmission from the inevitable consequence. They're requesting permission to dock. The inevitable consequence? Rex asked. New ship from the Mars shipyard, sir. Mixed crew, humans and aliens, working on something called collaborative reality engineering. Rex nodded. Send them docking clearance. And Barnes? Yes, sir. Make sure they know we're not responsible for any existential crises their reality engineering might trigger. Understood, sir. Should I mention that our version of reality is still under warranty? Only if they ask. Rex turned to gaze out at the stars, where human and alien ships now traveled side by side in formations that shouldn't be possible, but somehow worked anyway. The galaxy had become a bigger, stranger place than anyone had imagined, and it was only getting started. Final chapter. Humanity's comfort zone. Humanity was settling into the galaxy with the confident ease of a species that had never encountered a problem they couldn't solve, given enough stubbornness and a dash of creative thinking. Rex stood quietly at the viewing window, watching ships of every shape and species navigate the stars in formations that logic said shouldn't work, but still did. His peaceful reflection was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Sir," said the coffee machine, its voice fully synthesized, yet somehow managing to convey a tone of deep, wounded pride. "I've been reviewing the ship's efficiency data, and I believe my impact on crew morale has been severely undervalued." Rex sighed. "How much of a raise are we talking about? I want my own quarters. And a window. You're a coffee machine. I'm a sentient coffee machine. I have rights." Rex nodded slowly. "Fair point." He turned to his tactical officer. "Sir," Barnes reported, his voice filled with the kind of wonder normally reserved for religious miracles. "The alien fleet. They're not moving." "Not moving how?" Rex asked. "Not moving at all, sir. They're just sitting there. I think they're in shock." Chapter 8. The Diplomatic Solution. Rex rose from his command chair and adjusted his uniform. "Barnes, open a channel to the alien fleet." "All of them, sir." "All of them." Time for a group chat. The view screen divided into dozens of separate windows, each showing the bridge crew of a different hegemony ship. Commander Zixal's face took the center, his tentacles now glowing a shade that the universal translator described as really, really concerned. "Gentlemen," Rex said, addressing the collection of stunned alien commanders. "Ladies, and whatever species you are," he added with a respectful nod toward a particularly tentacled captain, "we seem to have a situation. You destroyed the righteous indignation." Zixal sputtered. "With one torpedo." "Yeah. About that," Rex replied, looking almost genuinely apologetic. "That was sort of a warning shot." "A warning shot?" Several commanders echoed in disbelief. "Yep," Rex continued. "Those quantum torpedoes are still experimental. Honestly, we're not entirely sure how they work. Something to do with probability matrices, quantum foam, and other things that make our science team cry." "You fired a test weapon at a heavy cruiser?" Zixal gasped. "Well, we couldn't let you think we were just going to roll over," Rex explained. "You showed up with 847 ships and started making threats. We had to show we weren't joking." "But the righteous indignation was a heavy cruiser," another alien commander said. "Its armor was thick enough to stop a small moon." "Was being the key word," Rex said softly. "Look, Commander. I think we got off on the wrong foot here," Rex said. "You're worried about space traffic laws. We're worried about not getting blown to pieces. Both are perfectly reasonable concerns." "Reasonable?" Zixal's voice cracked with disbelief. "You just violated the fundamental laws of physics." "Which laws exactly?" Rex asked innocently. "The ones that say matter cannot exist in multiple states at once." Rex shrugged. "Well, that's the thing about laws. They're more like guidelines, especially when you're dealing with humans." Chapter 9. The Human Condition. What followed was likely the most surreal diplomatic negotiation in the galaxy's history. Rex, standing casually on his bridge with his hands in his pockets, calmly explained to 846 increasingly uneasy alien commanders why their understanding of the universe was, in his words, adorably outdated. "See," Rex began as if commenting on the weather, "humans have this habit of looking at things that are supposed to be impossible and saying, well, that's annoying. Then we figure out how to make it happen anyway. But the mathematics," one commander started. "Math is more of a suggestion than a rule," Rex interrupted. "We've got engineers who can build anti-gravity units from spare parts and coffee filters. We've got scientists who've convinced quantum mechanics to behave just by yelling at it long enough. And we have weapons that work purely because they're too stubborn not to." "That's not how physics operates," Zixal objected. "Says who?" "Says the universe." Rex chuckled. "Commander, we're a species that looked at the vacuum of space and said, you know what this needs? More stuff. We looked at the speed of light and said, that's cute, but we've got places to be. We looked at entropy and said, not today. Thank you very much. You can't just ignore the fundamental forces of reality. Watch us." To make his point, Rex nodded at Murphy, who casually flipped a switch on his console. The defiant probability immediately broke several known conservation laws by accelerating at a speed that should have required the energy output of a small star. Then, it came to a sudden stop without any noticeable inertia, and finished with a graceful spin that made the local fabric of spacetime file a formal complaint with the Department of Universal Constants. "The thing is," Rex continued, as if nothing strange had occurred, "humans have a unique relationship with the universe. We know it has rules, we just think those rules are flexible. Especially when they're inconvenient. But if everyone just ignored the laws of physics, the universe would collapse." Zixal cried. "Would it?" Rex asked calmly. "Because our universe has been dealing with humans for about 200,000 years, and it's still hanging in there. A little frayed around the edges maybe, but that's what happens when you evolve a species that sees impossible as just another word for challenge." Chapter 10: The New Paradigm. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes when an entire belief system caves in under the weight of undeniable evidence. 846 alien commanders stared at their screens, watching one human ship, casually rewrite the rules of existence. "So," Rex said, breaking the silence, "about those traffic regulations. What about them?" Zixal's voice was small now. Defeated. "Well, I'm thinking maybe it's time to update them a little. That whole existing while ugly rule feels kind of subjective, don't you think? I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And let's be honest, some of us have very unusual taste." "But the committee," Zixal began. "You mean the committee that certifies itself?" Rex raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. I'm thinking it's time for some fresh input. Some new ideas. Maybe even some humans. Humans. On the Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness," Zixal said, stunned. "Why not? We've got strong opinions on what makes a ship work. And functionality is its own kind of beauty." Commander Zixal looked around at his bridge crew. They stared back at him with expressions that could only be described as watching someone try to explain color to a blind octopus. I'll have to speak with my superiors, he said finally. Of course, Rex replied. Take your time. We're not in a hurry. But what about the fleet? What about our mission? Rex smiled, the kind of smile that would haunt Zixal's dreams for many sleepless nights. Well, that depends. Not today. Thank you very much. You can't just ignore the fundamental forces of reality. Watch us. To make his point, Rex gave a nod to Murphy, who casually flipped a switch on his console. The defiant probability instantly violated multiple laws of physics, accelerating at a speed that should have required more energy than a small star produces, stopping on a dime with zero inertia, and then executing a graceful pirouette that made the local space-time continuum file a formal complaint with the Department of Universal Constants. The thing is, Rex continued, as though nothing strange had happened, humans have a unique relationship with the universe. We understand that it has rules, we just tend to see those rules as flexible, especially when they get in the way. But if everyone just ignored the laws of physics, Zixal stammered, the universe would collapse. Murphy, get the coffee machine some quarters. And a window. Murphy raised an eyebrow. Should I file that under routine maintenance or existential accommodation? Let's go with Tuesday, Rex said. It's been that kind of day. Epilogue. The Universal Constant. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy had found a strange sort of balance. Human ships regularly ignored the laws of physics, or bent them slightly when needed. Alien crews had started to appreciate the functional beauty of asymmetrical hulls and coffee-powered warp drives. And the universe itself had filed an official complaint with the Department of Cosmic Justice about humanity's tendency to treat fundamental constants as casual suggestions. The complaint was eventually dismissed when humans pointed out, quite reasonably, that the universe had been violating its own laws for billions of years. We're just leveling the playing field, they said. Admiral Zixtal, once a proud hegemony commander, now served as the official liaison to the human diplomatic corps. His tentacles had settled into a permanent shade best described by the translator as philosophical surrender. He still didn't fully understand humans. But he had learned one thing. When faced with impossible odds, reckless innovation, and a coffee machine with opinions, it was best to just nod, take notes, and hope the universe didn't implode before lunchtime. Admiral Zixtal stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Reasonable Expectations, a joint human-alien design that existed comfortably in 3 dimensions, and occasionally 4 when it was feeling ambitious. Its propulsion system was powered by a principle best described as, "Why not?" "Sir," called his communications officer, a human named Williams, who had somehow taught the universal translator how to speak in sarcasm. "We've received a priority message from Earth." "What's the message?" Zixtal asked. "They're inviting us to take part in something called Project Bigger Boom. Apparently, they've discovered how to make stars explode in prettier colors." Zixtal's tentacles, long accustomed to human antics, settled into their now permanent shade of cosmic resignation. "Send our acceptance," he replied. Then added, "And Williams." "Yes, sir. Make sure they understand we are not responsible for any artistic black holes." "Understood, sir. Should I mention that our insurance policy doesn't cover acts of human creativity?" only if they seem surprised. As the reasonable expectations adjusted course toward Earth, Admiral Zixtel found himself quietly reflecting. So much had changed since that first encounter with human stubbornness. He had learned the universe was far stranger and more astonishing than he'd ever imagined. That the so-called laws of physics were better understood as guidelines. That humans were entirely unpredictable, and that this unpredictability was their greatest strength. He had also learned something even more important. That was exactly what made them such good allies. Behind him, the ship's coffee machine, a gift from the defiant probability, purred contentedly, dispensing beverages that technically shouldn't exist, but tasted amazing anyway. Some things, Zixtel realized, were true universal constants: the speed of light, the pull of gravity, the slow drift toward heat death, and the relentless human ability to make anything work through sheer bloody-minded determination. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way. End of story. Would you like me to now compile the entire story into one polished file with formatting for PDF, ebook, or web publication? A title and subtitle. Author credit and blurb. Optional. Table of contents, cover prompt, tagline. Let me know, this story is ready for a big audience.